When you learn how to stay present with your own body without shame, when you learn how to sit with that part of you and hold it with more leadership, then your energy shifts, your confidence rebuilds. You have a different way of dealing with this discharge of sexual energy that's not harmful to your relationship. Instead, it could actually potentially rejuvenate it. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Sex After Kids podcast. We are in our last of this mini series for the dudes, for the penis owners. Before I dive in, we are like coming at just over a year here of the podcast. I've experimented with shorter episodes. I've experimented with being heavily scripted. I've experimented with being just like off the cuff, whatever. I would love to hear, like, what is your faves in this? What is your, what do you love listening to? And what do you want me to talk about? Like, do you want to talk about anal? Do you want to talk about threesomes? Do you want to talk about robot sex and like the future of AI girlfriends? Do you want to talk about being a single parent or divorced parent? Let me know. Hit me up over on Instagram. I love to hear from you. I want to put together my plan for next year, and you matter here. So I want to hear what it is that you want to hear from me. Okay, without further ado, today's a little bit spicy. Today's a little bit controversial because we're going to talk about pornography in the context of men in the gender binary. Okay. I actually have been talking to a few men folk who've been asking me about their partner's spicy book obsession. And so we are going to do a whole thing on that in the new year, I think. But today is specifically about porn and men. And I don't love talking about things in a gendered lens, and also because of the society that we grew up in and because it is heavily gendered. Because the messaging around this is so gendered, like it is important to talk about like men and porn because there's this particular kind of relationship there, a particular kind of attraction there, a particular kind of reach there that's not exclusive to men. Okay, women can have problems with porn too, and it might look different. So I'm speaking from things kind of in this lens, and it's important to know I come from a trauma-informed background. I also come from a sex-positive background. So I am not anti-porn. I am not anti-masturbation. I do have lots of questions about the ethics of porn, though I am pro-sex work and pro people making the choice to be sex workers for all kinds of reasons. We are not going to dive into those nuances today, okay? What I want to talk about today is why, or one of the reasons, so many men reach for porn, why it becomes problematic in our relationships, and what we can do about that. So I want to just open up the conversation today. This is a big thing. I'm sure there are a whole podcast series designed on this. And like, if you have more questions about this, let me know. I have a guest in mind that I want to invite who's recovered from his own porn addiction, using a lot of the same tools that I teach. And so I'd love to have him on, and I'd love to hear more about like what you want to talk about and investigate and explore on this topic. Okay. Because ultimately my firm belief is that I exist to talk about the taboo things, to bring them into light, to give you permission to open up these conversations, because pretending that porn is not a thing in our relationships is doing us harm. And the reality is that porn quietly kills a lot of relationships and a lot of marriages. So let's unpack that. So the first piece I want to kind of explore is like why porn feels easier, right? And I actually want to start in a different place, which is that for a lot of men, porn wasn't even necessarily like a choice. It was the only way to get an education, right? I talked to a lot of guys who are like, yep, the Sears catalog was the first place. But like when we live in a society that won't talk about sex, when we live in a society that won't acknowledge your very natural and normal urges when you're a young person, and when we live in a society that won't give you access or doesn't like giving you, is very resistant to giving you access to information, you are going to seek it out. And porn is more readily available than ever. That has changed in my lifetime for sure. But it starts in their teens. These days, it starts as early as 8 or 9, like accidental exposure. But nobody else is talking about it. So it becomes the textbook. It becomes the textbook for the expectation of what sex is supposed to look like, what sex is supposed to feel like, who's supposed to be talking, who's supposed to be initiating, how do you flirt, how do you get a woman interested in you, how big is your penis supposed to be, what does a female body, naked female body, look like? And the problem with that is that it's a highlight reel made for cameras, not connection, right? So it tells you what turns women on, except it's choreographed fantasy designed for um, the male gaze, the male eye, and it's not designed to create mutual pleasure. And increasingly, what we know is sex is more and more violent. Oh, sorry, not sex. Porn is more and more violent and modeling more violent, like dominating sex. Again, nothing wrong with a little BDSM play, but like, let's talk consent here. So it shapes how we think about all of these pieces, and it teaches everyone that sex is performance, that it's all about how you look and how good you are at certain things, and it discards that sex is about presence and connection. So if you're a guy and you're listening, like, I need you to hear this, that like, it's not bad in a way that like, this is where you sought information. And probably there was like an expectation that you engage with this, and maybe even male role models in your life exposed you to this. And also, I just want to tell you, like, I remember in my 20s when my girlfriends and I, like, we went to the porn shop. It was a whole novelty thing. We rented a couple videos to just be like, what's the whole deal? And it was very eye-opening for all of us. And do you know why it was eye-opening? It was eye-opening because we were all like, oh, that's why every single man tries to do XYZ when we fuck. That's why every man is trying to like rub my clitoris vigorously as if it's the end of the world, and he thinks that I'm going to orgasm that way. No wonder. We had this light bulb moment, okay, about like why sex sucks for us, and it's because y'all learned how to have sex from porn. So if that's where you learned how to be a masterful lover, I am gently, lovingly offering to you that you, like everyone I teach, has a mediocre sex skills because you weren't taught by anybody other than porn and maybe the occasional movie. And so don't beat yourself up about that, but you can do better, okay? You can do better. You were trained on a script that's not real life, and we can do better than that, all right? The second piece that I want to kind of talk about is like why porn feels easier. And in particular, if you grew up with porn, if you had a strong habit of pornography and using pornography to masturbate before you ever got naked with a woman, porn can kind of become a comfort. It becomes a friend. It becomes a place for emotional release. And oftentimes, porn addiction, I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm not an expert in addiction, but a big piece of porn addiction has to do with emotional escape, right? So if you have a partner who's using porn a lot, if you have a partner who's not having sex with you, but they're accessing porn a lot, it could mean they're not attracted to you and they're using another outlet. But it could also mean that they're feeling a lot of feels about whatever your sex life or whatever your relationship looks like, and they don't know how to deal with those emotions because, like we talked about last episode, men don't get taught the scripts for feeling and dealing with their emotions. So they're hiding, they're escaping those feelings, that discomfort in porn or in like masturbation and release that way. And it also might mean they're not it's not that they're not attracted to you anymore or they don't want to have sex with you anymore, but they have created programming now. Their nervous system is programmed for arousal to come from certain stimulation, and sort of limits the menu of things that create turn on in their body. Because if you know much about neuroscience, right, it's like you have the well paved, deep highway, the route you go many times, like reaching for chocolate when you're stressed. And then you have the back roads, which is me reaching for like lettuce when I'm stressed. And so it's more comfortable to ride the paved highway than it is to choose the back road. So if your partner's path to arousal, to orgasm, to sexual stimulation has been through porn, and that highway is nice and deep and grooved, it doesn't mean we can't learn to create that connection the other way, but it means there's a habit and deep neural pathways in this other way, which is why we call it an addiction, right? So, porn addiction is more complex than just, or porn use can be unhealthy. Porn use can be more complex than just your partner not loving you anymore or not being attracted to you anymore. They can do all those things and also be stuck in a cycle of unhealthy porn use, which is why, and I'll try to link to some resources below. Um, you want to treat it seriously, you want to explore it seriously and think about it, because as the partner who kind of gets left out, it can be really easy to dismiss it as just like, well, why don't you just stop? Well, it's the same as alcoholism. It's the same as drug use. Like, it's the same as phone addiction these days. Like, your brain can't stop without support, right? The other reason there's kind of like an allure to pornography, certainly if things in our relationship are a struggle, right? So why would we turn to porn? Maybe we've always had like a medium relationship with porn. We use it occasionally for our solo sessions, but it's never become problematic. And then we have a baby. And then our partner doesn't want to have sex anymore for like a year or two, which is completely normal and relatable, but we didn't have any of the skills to deal with that. And so we take our pain and our hurt and we turn inward and we reach for pornography. And we reach for pornography because the women in pornography do not demand anything of us. There is no relationship with the partners in pornography, so there's no effort required. It's completely one way, which is why it can feel hollow and empty. But when we're looking for that instant gratification instead of deep connective pleasure, it certainly delivers there. It also can give us the illusion of control, or we are in control. We can demand whatever we'd like of our pornography. It will deliver any fantasy we can imagine without us fearing the rejection of our partner saying no to just sex of any kind, or sex of like our deepest desires and fantasies. There's lots of reasons that people are reaching for this, and I think that's like the nuance that I just want to bring to this conversation is there's healthy use of healthy and ethical porn. And by that I mean if it stimulates imagination and conversation between the two of you, amazing. If it's a way to play together, amazing. If it's a way for you to play with yourself, amazing. And if it's creating emotional distance, and if you are choosing it over the people that you love, if you can't think about anything else, if it's becoming destructive to your relationship and to the other parts of your life, then it's problematic usage, and we need to explore what's happening. Is this a habit and an addiction? Is this me hiding from the discomfort that's in my relationship because it's easier to relate to this and I just don't want to put the effort in, or I'm avoiding the effort in my relationship? Because it's really easy to say that porn is easier, but your relationship can be easier sometimes, but we need to up level the skills. And that's really just like the awareness or the conversation that I kind of want to open up to here, is that oftentimes porn becomes a way to avoid emotional connection, but not just with your partner, with yourself. It's a way to tune out rejection. It's a way to tune out the stress or the ache of, I don't know how to fix it. And when it becomes your main coping strategy, it starts to shape your brain and your beliefs about sex. So the other piece, if we go back to like, this is how we learned to have sex, right? If you learned how to have sex with porn, you've learned to have sex in a very disembodied way. And by that, I mean, you're not in your body feeling how your hands feel on your body, noticing the sensations, noticing what's happening to your penis, noticing what's happening in your arousal, noticing what's happening with your emotions. You are very disembodied. You are out of your heart. You are in your brain, running the reel, getting the dopamine feed. And part of why masturbation with pornography can feel so hollow is because of that. There isn't connection with another human being, but there's also not connection with yourself. And most of us don't actually learn how to masturbate or self pleasure in a very embodied way. I joke all the time that women learn how to like wham bam, thank you, ma'am themselves. So there's a difference between masturbating to like rub one out or have an orgasm so you can fall asleep and making love to yourself. And if we don't have the skills to make love to our partners, like we don't have the skills to make love to ourselves. And yet, that is where the juicy, yummy, satisfying, like soul quenching, toe curling goodness actually lives. So, just a little bit about like what porn does to your system over the long term if you've been a pretty extensive user, right? So, over time, regular porn use, especially when it's your main outlet, starts to rewire your brain, like I was talking about. So, it becomes like chasing the dopamine hit, not the connection. It often is very like fast and frivolous. And so, we get used to fast and frivolous stimulation and we don't know how to slow down and be present with and relax with pleasure and orgasmic pleasure, like circulating in our body for longer than like 5 minutes. It just becomes this like click, climax, and done sort of piece. And it separates arousal from our relationship. So we might notice that it takes more intensity or more fantasy, more violence, more stimulation to feel turned on. It can feel harder to get aroused with your partner. You can start to feel detached instead of satisfied when you have sex with your partner, or you might experience like premature ejaculation or have troubles getting hard. And it isn't because you're broken, it's because your brain learned how to link pleasure, orgasm, and those kinds of things with porn and with isolation. Like it's something that happens alone without another person. And so then it's harder to do with another person. And the good news is that we can retrain your brain. If we trained your brain into this one way of doing, we can absolutely train your brain into another way of doing. And that's where I want to bring on my special guest. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the principles here just so that you get a taste, because this is one piece that I offer in the Roommates to Romance Challenge. So if you haven't heard yet, right, the Roommates to Romance Challenge is my 14-day challenge for higher libido partners, typically men, who are wanting to create more connection with their partner. But every time they reach for a touch or a kiss or a connection, they get the gristle effect, the push pull back, because it always seems to be linked to sex. So this challenge is a way for you to like rewire your connection with your partner so that you can touch and flirt and connect without feeling or creating the pressure to get to the bedroom. But I've got 2 bonuses in there. One is called the Rejection Recovery Toolkit, and it's how to deal with rejection in a more productive way so that you're not spilling your hurt all over your partner. And the second is the Mindful Masturbation Method. And this is a method that I use to help men and women come back into connection with their own body and their own feelings during intimacy and rebuild that connection with their partner over time. And this is why I'm pro masturbation. Okay. I think that masturbation is a healthy part of your sexual practice. For all of us, it gives us space and time and freedom and safety to like experiment with our own body and be able to then communicate that with our partner. But also, it's a space for a huge amount of healing to happen. And that healing takes the form of what I call mindful masturbation. And you can access that bonus in the Roommates to Romance Challenge for just $9, my friends. The bonus is free. Okay. So grab that in the show notes if you're interested. But let's talk a little bit about how this happens, right? So, like I said at the beginning, I am not anti-porn. I am anti-shame because shame makes you hide and hiding kills connection. So the goal isn't to quit or you're a bad person, in my view. It's to understand your relationship with porn and decide if it is something that is supporting your connection with your partner and yourself or sabotaging it. And that's only a question that you can answer for yourself. The line I want you to remember is that it's not about replacing porn with more sex. It is about replacing the shame that you might be feeling with actual skills. Okay. And mindful masturbation is one of those skills, along with many others that I teach couples in the Naked Fun Comeback, which is my signature program for parents. So, masturbation isn't the problem itself, right? Like I mentioned before, I am not anti masturbation. I am super pro masturbation because it can be part of healing if you do it mindfully. Okay, so there's a very big difference between sitting down to have a solo sesh, whether it's out of resentment and frustration or just because like you're feeling like you want to get frisky with yourself, right? So I want you to imagine two different scenarios, right? I want you to imagine sitting down to a solo sesh, putting on your favorite like YouPorn video, rubbing one out to the length of the video. You probably even like skipping forward to like the good parts, the intense parts, having an orgasm, moving on. Okay, that's probably your typical scenario, maybe rolling over and passing out. I want you to imagine instead how powerful it could be if you sat down, you set a timer for yourself, you took a deep breath, no screens, maybe a little music, maybe a little candle, like you actually set the mood for yourself the way you might for your partner. You took a few deep breaths to check in with where you are at today. You start to play and stimulate, and instead of being really mentally focused and running that porn reel, you are focused on how your hand feels on your body. And you are just curious and breathing. And anytime your brain's getting distracted, this is the mindfulness part, you're just bringing yourself back to your breath or how your body feels. Okay? So we're slowing the whole process down so that we can get present to how we feel and what sensations we're even feeling. We ditch the fantasy. So we might be using some imagination, but I even challenge you to like just get focused on the sensuality of this experience, of the embodiment. What does it feel like to be in your body? And then breathe and stay present through the process. And I want you to imagine what kind of quality of orgasm you could experience if you did that instead. And I've been talking to a dad recently who's in the Roommates to Romance Challenge who's been doing this. It has been game changer for him. He said it's like taking Viagra, my friends, in terms of how long that energy is circulating in him. He said he watched some porn recently and like it just felt so flat and like nothingness compared to the experience of this mindful masturbation practice. So there is a ton of potential here. And I've done some episodes on healing before in somatics. Maybe I'll get into a deeper one. But this is also the foundation of how we let go of the shame that we feel around our porn use, or the shame that we feel around not being able to stay hard for our partner, or the shame that we feel around not being a good lover. This is how we get present to it and release it and let go of it so that we can have the best sex life possible with our partner. Yeah, we're already at 25 minutes. I kind of want to wrap this up for today. I hope this has just sprinkled some seeds of consideration. If you are a female partner listening to this and you worry about your partner's porn use or you have questions about it, I want you to consider that it's not about how they feel about you. Maybe it's a pattern. And maybe there are some door openers that you could explore in terms of just having an open conversation together about like, what was your first experience with pornography? Was it the Sears catalog or the Playboy mag under the bed? To have an honest conversation about how your partner feels about porn instead of like demonizing it and making it the other girlfriend. How can we get curious about where that relationship comes from? Is that porn use coming from a place of feeling deep, deep, deep inadequacy and shame in your relationship? Can you create a space where your partner can get vulnerable enough to admit that out loud to themselves and to you? Because that is the starting point for ending porn use, minimizing porn use, and more importantly, recreating the connection between you. If you're a man listening to this, you can do a little mini audit. Like if you cannot orgasm without sex, if you find yourself reaching for it the way I reach for that chocolate bar when I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed, annoyed, whatever, if you feel guilty or disconnected afterwards, or you are hiding or lying about your porn use, then these are flags that maybe you want to reach out to somebody, whether it's me or someone else. I'll link some resources below to think about like, oh, it's not that porn is evil. It's not that I'm a bad person for using porn, but maybe the way I'm using porn is doing a disservice to myself and to my relationship. And maybe I want to think about changing that. If you're using porn to numb rejection or stress, that makes sense. But what if instead you use that same energy to actually feel emotions again? I know, terribly inconvenient, but like, what will it do for your relationship if you were able to master that skill? What if you could learn to actually meet your body with compassion instead of trying to control it, and to let arousal and emotion actually live in the same room? That is what mindful masturbation does. It builds your capacity. It helps you to stay present with your feelings and with your partner ultimately, without needing to like run away from them. And that, my friends, is the sexy strength and the maturity that your partner is looking from for you as you become a leader in the bedroom. Okay. So, most men think that the way back to intimacy is getting their partner to say yes more often. And that can be true. But really, the real shift starts with how you relate to your own body, your own arousal, and your own sexuality. Because I guarantee you, if you have a partner who says no a lot, you are probably in a loop where somewhere deep down you feel like your desire or your want or need for sex is a bad or shameful thing. And it is not, but how you're expressing that desire could be a little backwards, is what I want to say gently. When you learn how to stay present with your own body without shame, when you learn how to sit with that part of you and hold it with more leadership, then your energy shifts, your confidence rebuilds. You have a different way of dealing with this discharge of sexual energy that's not harmful to your relationship. Instead, it could actually potentially rejuvenate it. Every time you use porn and tune out, you reinforce this disconnection in your relationship. Are you putting a penny in the connection jar or in the disconnection jar? And every time you touch yourself with awareness, you build connection to your own body, to your own life, to your own sexuality, and ultimately, eventually, to your partner. You can literally retrain your brain to crave closeness instead of escape. And if you are ready to do that, all you need to do is grab the Roommates to Romance Challenge for less than a latte and grab the Mindful Masturbation bonus for free. If this is really a struggle for you, you can upgrade for $47 for one-on-one coaching with me and chat with me like this lovely gentleman, Papa. Shout out to you if you know who you are, who's been chatting with me. Or you can always head over to my DMs and just chat with me and let's connect. Okay. If this has been useful, let me know in the comments in IG. If you want to have this, open this conversation, talk about it more, let's talk about it. Please share this episode with someone who you think it might be relevant for, and we will talk again soon.